Now to Dr. Wakefield. He is a gastrointestinal surgeon with training in small bowel transportation. An academic research interest has been inflammatory bowel disease, including the role of measles virus in Crohn's disease. This is the retracted 1998 Lancet article. Ileal lymphoid nodular hyperplasia, nonspecific colitis, and pervasive developmental disorder in children. It is a case series of 12 children with colitis and autism. A case series presents clinical observations that may provide a basis for hypotheses that can then be studied. And quoting from the paper, we identified associated gastrointestinal disease and developmental regression in a group of previously normal children, which was generally associated in time with possible environmental triggers, and that being the MMR. The article noted that this may have occurred by chance, but the uniformity of the intestinal findings in the children suggested a unique disease process. They did not claim to prove an association with the MMR, but that in most cases the symptoms appeared after the MMR and that further study was needed. To conduct this case series, Dr. Wakefield assembled a multidisciplinary team of 13 physicians to study 12 consecutively referred children with autism and bowel disease. And included on the team was John Walker Smith, a highly renowned pediatric gastroenterologist. And here is John Walker Smith. A senior pathologist, blinded to the diagnosis, reviewed all the biopsy slides to make the final diagnosis. Wakefield did not alter the results, contrary to what is reported frequently in the press. I'm going to give a timeline to give a context to the accusations made against Dr. Wakefield. It may seem disjointed, but bear with me. And here are the primary sources I used to make this timeline. The mumps strain used in the MMR is important, as will become clear. In 1967, the first MMR was introduced in the United States by Merck using the Gerald-Lynn strain, not the Urabi strain. In 1986, Canada introduced an MMR using the Urabi mumps virus strain, produced by a company later to become incorporated as part of GlaxoSmithKline. With active surveillance, Canada recognized that the MMR Urabi vaccine was associated with meningitis, and in 1988, Canadian authorities suspended distribution of the MMR Urabi vaccine, but did not yet withdraw the license. The British Department of Health approved the licensing of the MMR Urabi vaccine, despite the Canadian experience and internal advice against its approval. The pharmaceutical company was granted the license and indemnified for the vaccine in Britain. In 1989, Japan introduced an MMR Urabi vaccine, and cases of aseptic meningitis followed. Letters appeared in the Lancet describing cases of meningitis in England after the MMR. The British Committee on Safety in Medicine was aware of cases of vaccine-associated mumps meningitis but took no action. A member of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization expressed concern about the risk to the MMR program from adverse publicity. In 1990, Canada withdrew the MMR Urabi license, followed by other countries. Multiple documented adverse reactions were noted in Britain, despite the inadequacies of the yellow card reporting system, which, like our VAERS system, is a passive system in which only a percentage of reactions tend to be reported. The British Department of Health continued to use the MMR Urabi vaccine after it had been withdrawn from other countries. In 1992, the British Legal Aid Board received increasing applications on behalf of children claiming personal injury as a result of MMR vaccination. SmithKline Beecham, now part of GlaxoSmithKline, in 1992 issued a stop to the use of the MMR-Urabi vaccine. Active surveillance in Nottingham had shown the meningitis rate to have been very high. So the bottom line is that from 1988 to 1992, the United Kingdom used a vaccine known to be associated with excess meningitis. The license for the vaccine was not withdrawn, and production continued with distribution overseas. In 1994, Britain undertook a mass revaccination effort with the MMR2 with the Gerald Lynn strain. Richard Barr, a lawyer, is granted funding from the Legal Aid Board to pursue a class action suit against the manufacturers of the MMR vaccines based on a claim that the MMR was a defective product and should not have been used, and that children were killed or seriously injured by the vaccine. Andrew Wakefield, actively involved in research and publication. This article is on perinatal measles infection and subsequent Crohn's disease. In 1995, others were accusing the Department of Health of misleading the public, and a mass immunization program was ongoing in Brazil with a vaccine-associated outbreak of aseptic meningitis. Once again, the MMR-Urabi continued to be used in other countries, including Brazil. Andrew Wakefield was continuing his academic work on Crohn's disease and measles infection and became more widely known for his work. Parents began to contact him, and he referred them to John Walker Smith for evaluation of their bowel disease. In 1995, the British government did compensate a family for a child suffering brain damage after the MMR. Richard Barr, aware of Dr. Wakefield's expertise, made contact, and Dr. Wakefield agreed to be an expert witness on measles vaccine and Crohn's disease litigation cases. Dr. Wakefield also agreed to perform a study financed by the Legal Aid Board for measles virus detection in 5 children with Crohn's and 5 with autism and bowel disease. Funds were requested from the Legal Aid Board for money to perform this research. Andrew Wakefield assembles his team and prepares the clinical and research protocols to evaluate children with developmental disorder and intestinal symptoms, which is completely separate from the legal work. So there were 3 distinct issues. 1, the case series of patients with developmental disorder and intestinal symptoms, which resulted in the Lancet article. 2, he had agreed to be an expert for litigation cases involving Crohn's and measles vaccine. And 3, he had agreed to do a study to detect measles virus in 5 children with Crohn's and in 5 with autism and bowel disease. In regards to the study financed by the Legal Aid Board, the dean of the medical school was very concerned about unwelcome controversy surrounding the work on Crohn's disease by Dr. Wakefield and his group. The dean communicates with officers of the British Medical Association and Department of Health about his concerns. Clearly, this could lead to a case against the government for damages. The Ethics Committee chairman of the British Medical Association applied that to delay or to decline to conduct research on the grounds that it might embarrass the government would be unethical. According to the dean, there is absolutely no suggestion of any misconduct by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. A check from the Legal Aid Board is sent to Andrew Wakefield, who forwards it to finance. So the funds of the study were paid to the medical school and not to Dr. Wakefield. Due to ongoing delays by a reluctant dean, Dr. Wakefield asked the finance department to return the funds in full to the lawyers of the Legal Aid Board. But the dean had signed off on the check from the Legal Aid Board and had sent it to an account managed by a hospital charity. And Dr. Wakefield continued his academic work and publication of his research. I'll pause to make some comments. Parental fears and legal actions began prior to the Lancet article. The British Department of Health had knowingly used a problematic vaccine associated with excess meningitis in several countries. And we are now at the 1998 article we've already discussed. At a press briefing, Andrew Wakefield recommended single vaccines against measles, mumps, and rubella until the safety of the combination was better studied. Certainly reasonable given the lack of safety studies on the MMR and the recent MMR-Urabi experience. 6 months after Dr. Wakefield recommended single vaccines, the Department of Health withdrew the option for the single vaccines. So the option was removed from parents by the government just when the demand was highest, giving concerned parents only 2 options: use the MMR or don't vaccinate. The Brazilian experience of meningitis with Urabi vaccine is published. An interesting comment from the article that the issue is not simply whether or not a specific vaccine causes a problem, but how a vaccination strategy influences the visibility of the problem and affects public confidence. The entire target population was vaccinated in a short span of time, and you can see the dramatic rise in meningitis cases. In Britain, an independent general practitioner spoke against the use of the MMR in favor of single vaccinations, and legal proceedings were initiated against him, but the case dropped. More bad press appears about the MMR. Were all these children killed by the triple jab? Wakefield continued his research into inflammatory bowel disease and participates in a study that confirms an association between the presence of measles virus and bowel disease in children with developmental disorder. Also at this time, the U.S. Vaccine Court formed the Omnibus Autism proceeding. The chairman of the Lancet publisher becomes a board member of GlaxoSmithKline, one of the co-defendants in the MMR litigation by the Legal Aid Board. The British Legal Services Commission withdrew funding from the MMR legal action on the grounds that the litigation did not have any reasonable prospect of success. An appeal against the withdrawal of legal aid was lost, and the judge ruling on the appeal was the brother of the man who was the chief executive of the Lancet and a board member of GlaxoSmithKline. Thus, after 10 years of preparation by family